and we're going to talk about college today and try to get people to think about some different things that they probably don't like before going into college. And two of the things are just going to be the first thing is return on investment. Is it worth the money, or is it worth like the time? Like investment is not just, that's what most people think of, is just money. Like, are you going to repay it? But there's a lot of other investments that you're making and that sort of thing. The other thing we're going to go into is trying to look at the deep, as far as we can go, psychological reason as to why people are influenced to go down these paths, to go to college or whatever. And definitely this podcast is not to say that every instance is bad or that it isn't a good idea. There aren't some fields that aren't worth pursuing or whatever, depending on who you are. This is really just to help people see things that a lot, at least me in particular, being 25, I've been out of college for like 5 years now. So things that I didn't think about until years later that I wish I would have, etc. Mm-hmm. So, let's jump into it. So, the first thing is going to be return on investment. So, obviously, the first thing you want to look at is there jobs in your field?
Right.
If you look that up online, I think psychology and art degrees are the worst to return on investment.
Yeah, and also, coincidentally, the ones that we produce the most of. So
exactly.
And actually, that probably has a lot to do with it, too, being that they are produced at such a high rate. It's purely market forces that are dropping the price of those jobs down considerably. But also relative to a lot of other market segments, there's just not much need inherently in the market for that many psychologists. Whether they were there or not, the price for them probably would be relatively low already. But now to compound that, we're producing far more of them than any nation, especially ours, would need.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing about that is it makes you think, why is there such a following of people going to school for these things? Like if there isn't a demand or a need for those jobs in our society, then how is it possible that so many people are getting loans to go to school for that thing?
Sure.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what happens is a college education gets commodity status where you're told from a young age, if you have a 4-year degree, regardless of the quality or the nature of that degree, that you will somehow make more money just by having it, by nature of having that commodity. But again, the quality of that commodity is a big factor in whether or not it will get you your return on investment. Because if it's a low quality, commodity to start, if it's not up to the standards that other commodities like an engineering degree or a doctorate in medicine would offer you, you're not going to be afforded the same level of return that those other professions have. So that's part of the problem. Kids are very generically told that a college degree, a 4-year degree, is going to equate to more money. But if everybody's buying the same story, you're going to end up with a bunch of disillusioned kids later on. So I think that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, and that's a whole another topic that we're going to get into pretty deep later, trust me.
Oh, absolutely.
So the next thing is, assuming you do get a job, so whatever it is, decide you when you're 18 years old or whatever, the most of us, when you go to college, whatever you go for, assuming that you do land a job, how long is it going to take you? How many years is it going to take you to repay it? And that's, also calculating the interest on these loans. One of my best friends, his girlfriend, was in some 20,000, I think it was like 23,000 and dollars when she started, and now it's like 30,000 or something. Like the amount of interest that accrues on these loans, I don't think people understand or even can fathom the math over years.
Right. Well, what's interesting on that too is though, a lot of times the student loans are artificially low on the interest rate. It is amazing though, even though they are relatively low interest rate, how fast a low interest rate still compounds. Even though it's billed as a low interest rate, it's really not a low interest rate in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars.
3 or 4% seems like nothing.
Right.
When you're just looking at it as a number. Right. But over years of 20, 30, 40, even a lot of cases 6 digits of college loan debt expounding that much. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It begins to balloon exponentially, and that's the problem is once you start falling behind, like anything with the rate, it snowballs, and so it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And they changed the law, of course, so that you can't declare bankruptcy on student loans, which at some level makes sense because the problem was that they were getting a lot of doctors, especially, that would come out. They would have $200,000-$300,000 in debt, some of them, and what they would do is they would declare bankruptcy, open a practice, and begin collecting money without any student loan whatsoever. So people were getting frustrated with that, and rightfully so. But the issue is that law now applies to everybody. And as well it should. I mean, if you take out a loan, your word is your bond, and you should be held accountable for that. But there's the issue. There's no getting out from the mountain of debt that we've produced for this generation. But it is an insurmountable amount of money for a lot of people. When you're talking, regardless, it's just assuming the average on that is, let's say 35 to 40,000 per student. And that is probably bigger than most people's starting salary coming out of college, which means they would have to work for free for a year, not including tax, not including living expenses, all that stuff. You would be working for a year basically as a slave to your loan. And so I think that when you start to consider that our parents' generation and their parents before them were working part-time jobs to pay for this. And we're at a point now where it's not a part-time job. It's a full-time career that needs to be dedicated to paying off 4 years of education.
And in a lot of cases, I think I see this more than anything as far as people that are my age. It's just like, hey, what are you doing with your life? Oh, I'm trying to get out of debt so I can live my life. That's pretty much everybody. I'm trying to get out of debt so I can do this, so I can move here, so I can chat, whatever. So, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next point so we keep going. The next thing that I really want to talk about is after years of doing this, because for many of us, and me in particular, when I went to school, it was like, you just get into this thing where you're in high school, and it's like everybody just goes to college. It's just like the natural, it's just like everybody went to high school and now everybody goes to college, and that's just that's just the next thing. Yeah. So it's like you have this mindset where it's like, okay, well, what do you want to do?
Right.
And it's very much like, well, as long as you work hard enough, you'll get a good job and whatever. But in all reality, looking back, what I wish that I would have done is worked a crappy job, lived somewhere cheap, and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. Figure out like who I am and all of that sort of stuff. Oh, absolutely. Because it gets into years later, and I see this, which is really sad for people that have been in school for several years, is people that are just like don't really know, or they have this illusion that like if you go to school to be a doctor or an engineer or a musician or whatever, then like you put so much of your life into transitioning into that's like you think that's who you are. Mm-hmm. But in reality, and I get this from Alan Watts, but he said that your occupation title is not who you are. Like if you're a lawyer or something, that's something that you can be doing in a certain part of time or point in time, right. But that's not your identity. Right. And with that being said, I found this really cool article that is talking about exactly this point. So I'm going to read this really quick. And this website was leadership and humanpotential.com. And it has a pretty interesting title to the article. It's called The 4-Step Plan to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life, How to Get Unstuck, Unbored, and On Your Way. So, in the beginning of this, it says the problem. And I'm just going to read the story. It says, while catching up with a friend of mine the other day, we'll call her Kira, she lamented, as many of us in our late 20s and 30s do, that she felt confused and torn about what to do with her life. Despite the fact that she's about to graduate with an advanced degree from a top school and has plenty of professional connections, Kira is neither excited about her prospective career options nor has been able to come up with any better alternatives. I feel badly complaining about it because I know there are worse things to deal with, but I feel kind of bored and stuck, or maybe I'm just lazy, she finally confessed. Yeah. Kira is privileged, which at least she's self-aware enough to recognize, and in general is dealing with one of the more preferable of life's challenges, being flushed with options but lacking a sense of direction or motivation. Nevertheless, her story is a pretty common one. You start a career and maybe do some post-bachelorette or graduate training. You're a few years in, finally have some time to reflect and even coast a little when you realize that you're feeling off path, off center, and like you're maybe possibly definitely headed in the wrong direction. You begin to recognize that the current state of the world feels wrong, but have no flipping idea what to do to set it right. And the more you think about it, the more you stress and fret about making the wrong move. You're no longer 22. Decisions you make now matter, yada yada. The reality is that tons of people go through this, and it's totally normal, and in my opinion may even signal some high level of self-reflection and thoughtfulness, and a desire to always question the status quo, all of which are good. So, in a lot of ways, that perfectly sums up the point that I wanted to make with this, with the identity thing. Because it really is that thing where it's like you're so far down this path, and for me, I have an associate's degree, so I went to school for audio engineering for 2 years, and I just tried to work my butt off as much as possible. I was like Dean's List student like every quarter, and a lot of times it was like it was quite a drive to get out there. So a lot of times I would be there 13 hours, or especially near the end when I had internships, which were all unpaid.
Yep.
I'd be working on projects all day long. And then I'd stay up all night editing or something.
Right.
And it just got to the point where it was like, I had 5 or 6 different kind of internships going on by the time I was about to graduate. I was working on some indie films. I was interning with a guitar luthier, but it was also like an audio studio, and I was helping set up a tape machine, and I recorded some bands and stuff like that. And then I was also doing editing for a podcast. And yeah, all of that was learning experience, which always blew my mind. And I was very resentful to a big extent, because it was like, you know what? I just spent like almost $40,000 to go to school to do all this hard work to learn. And now I'm out and I'm still learning. I'm still not getting paid anything.
Yeah.
Like, how does this make? And it just got to the point where I was editing this podcast. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, and the other thing is working on the indie films. It's just like, you don't even, when you get started, a lot of times like you don't even know if you're going to get paid or what you're going to get paid. Yeah. And then a lot of times you might work on this one film where you get paid like a decent amount of money, and then you'll work on another one where they don't pay you, or they'll pay you a little, and it's just totally crazy.
Yeah.
And if that's something that you just love editing or whatever, and you love that so much that you want to spend 10, 15 years of your life doing that, then go for it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that you shouldn't do that. But what I do want people to think about is, years down the road, is it worth it?
Right.
And that brings me to the next point is, we said return on investment, getting your return on investment. The first thing is, are you going to make the money in a reasonable amount of time? And, how many years are you willing to put into that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then finally is time.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing is, while you're a full-time student, it's easily 40 hours a week.
Oh, yeah.
Going to classes alone.
Yeah.
And then, doing homework. If you can get your homework done and go to all your classes and get that done in 40 hours, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Oh, absolutely.
And the interesting dynamic is, instead of this, in my opinion, most young adults, I'll say, I don't think that's really the best way for them to be spending. Like, for me personally, I wish I would have been investing that time in myself.
Right.
Figuring out, stuff like that, like creating yourself, like figuring out your identity versus like, in many of these paths trying to fit society's mold for you.
Right. Yep. No, and I mean, that's really getting back to the root of all things relating to your career choice. Really what people are doing is they're trading the one currency that is the true currency out there, and that currency is labor, is time. There is no wealth without labor. Labor is the driver of wealth and not the other way around. And because labor is ultimately the final currency, what everything can be brought back to, when you're trading dollars, what you're really trading is hours, and just depending on whose hours they are, there may be more valuable than others, and that's kind of how society, basically puts value on certain jobs. But basically, you're trading as an opportunity cost your labor, your hours, in studying to better yourself long term. And so again, it gets back into that people are told kind of a generality that's not 100% true, and that is that if you better yourself through education, that you'll somehow your hours, your labor will be worth more. So they're trading some of their time now for, in essence, not having to work as hard later. So it's an investment in labor now.
But the thing about that is that you can invest in your time and increase what your time is worth.
Right.
But if you're doing the same labor,
right,
the only way you'll make more money is if you climb a corporate ladder.
Sure, that's true.
You climb a ladder so that you advance positions, or you get a raise, which most cases it's 40 cents. You're barely even keeping up with inflation.
Right. But that, a lot of that is market factors. It's for better or for worse, it boils down to whether or not your input, your labor, your hours are worth what somebody's willing to pay. They're willing to give you essentially dollars, which equate to their hours. So they're willing to give you hours of their time in exchange for hours of yours. It just depends on what that exchange rate is. And that's what education is for, is to increase the leverage of your hours versus other people in the market's hours. But when they're selling that truth that you can better your hours or better the rate of your hours, and everybody's doing it relative to everybody else, you're leveraging nothing. Basically, if everybody else is doing it, your betterment in your career advancement isn't worth it, because now you're doing the same thing everybody else is doing. It's not a rare commodity anymore. And so ultimately that's part of why you're not seeing the explosion in career success that you would have seen 30 years ago with somebody who had a degree. It's just because it's common. Everybody has it now. So what we need to do probably going forward, a great way to get around some of this, well, one, I think a market correction is coming on its own, and the college system is just inherently untenable going long term. But beyond that, I think it would be nice to see some type of system that was based on merit, determined by a third party after, post college, some type of a test or something. And really, I think that ultimately that's going to be job performance review type stuff, where internally a company is going to decide whether or not that person is worth it. And so that's probably what you're going to see, is as the college system really starts to collapse in on itself, companies making a concerted effort to find the best talent with or without a degree. And really getting back to the root of the whole problem too, and whether or not, I guess we really hadn't planned on covering this, but I'll jump in because it's important anyway to understand.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
The nature of the issue. What we're seeing here is the housing bubble, the 2008 housing bubble, all over again.
Oh yeah. Except we can't file bankruptcy.
We can't file bankruptcy, so that's part.
But I believe that's another point that I'm going to get into, is how this is different and how I see that.
Right. Well, there's no house to extract. They can't come into your brain and suck out the information that they gave you and put it into somebody else.
They can't take the time out and
they can't
take the teachers that were paid.
Exactly. It's a completely different animal. But what you're seeing is low interest rate loans going out to students that probably shouldn't have gotten the loan for the degree they were going for in the first place.
And the other thing that I'll note on that too, from talking to different private banks that give out loans, is that they have to, if you meet certain requirements, they have to give you a loan, even if there is absolutely no return. Like, let's say, for example, let's say there are, just to give you an example, like let's say there's 5 jobs in like audio engineering or something.
Yep.
In the country or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's 2,000 kids or something that want to go to school to learn how to do that.
Right.
Well, the banks have to give loans to those kids, even though they know the other 1,995 kids are gonna have to work somewhere else or whatever, or not gonna be able to pay it back or whatever.
Yep.
Which absolutely blows my mind, and I've talked to several employees that work at these banks, and it's just like, yep.
It really is the housing bubble. It's the same thing. They could see the writing on the wall. They knew these home buyers were bad investments, and they had no choice but to offer them a loan. And so, yeah, you're going to see the same thing. It'll be a collapse of sorts in the education system, where people, as this information gets out, if people really start to question, what the value of their education really is, you're going to see tuition prices probably start to come down. It probably won't be as violent as the housing bubble, because again, it's a little bit different product that they're selling. It's not something that's traded on a market like a house is. It's an education, and it's much more internal than that. And so you probably won't see a violent crash, but you will probably see people begin to find other avenues for making money. One of them is obviously going to be to leave and start their own business and make money that way. And then that's a very attractive offer for many people, or an option, if they can go out and use the sweat of their own brow to pull themselves out of potential poverty. That's really an appealing option for a lot of people. Not everybody has that skill set or that desire. But I think you're going to see that's going to be a big thing. You're going to see a lot of micro companies springing up, new startups, people doing what they can when they can, even out of their garages and things like that, just to get by. And that'll definitely change the economy. It'll be a completely different future. And the internet is responsible for a lot of that, actually, too. It wouldn't be possible to do a lot of the things that we're doing were it not for that. But I think that's what you're going to see going forward. People taking it upon themselves to better their own lives, and getting some of that independent spirit back. That's, I think, the way that we're going to get out from the problem we're facing now. But in the immediate future, it's definitely going to be stressful for a lot of people.
It's going to be an interesting transition into that.
Oh, absolutely.
And while you're you brought up a lot of good points that I kind of wanted to cover.
Sure.
One of them is just what I'm seeing with some ways as far as federal debt.
Yep.
There are some companies now, and I find this very interesting. Just the thought of this, but there are private companies that solely their sole purpose is to guarantee that they can get you into a federal program. And the thing about that's so funny to me is that it's such a pain in the ass to get in one of these programs that there has to be a company that has to invest all of this time and money to try to get you in. And I was talking to one of them recently. I can't remember. I'll have a link to it. But basically, their thing is, okay, you pay $200 a month for 5 months, and we guarantee we get you in this program. And what it is it's a 25-year program. And how it works is, as long as your income is below a certain amount, you'll make $0 payments up until 25 years. And then by the end of that time period, if you haven't paid off your federal loans, they'll forgive them. However, what's interesting about this is, number one, if you do start to make more money, you're going to have to pay your loans off.
Right.
So that $1,000 that you spent over 5 months is gone now. Yep. That was an investment. So it's kind of like, well, do I want to stay poor for the next 25 years so I don't have to pay off this federal debt? So do I have enough federal debt that this $1,000 investment is worth it?
Yep.
So that's one thing that I see is very interesting. And my assumption is that, and the thing is that basically they'll give you your money back if they can't get you into the program.
Right.
But it still is over a 5-month period, $1,000 that you're not going to have.
Right.
Because, $200 at a time.
Yep.
My assumption and where I see that going is that eventually that investment is going to be, there's obviously the dynamic that I just talked about where it's like, well, do you want to stay poor for 25 years?
Right.
Because really that investment should be used to invest in yourself.
Yep.
Like you're saying, if you're going to start a business or you're going to do whatever, that's time that you're completely killing. That's that's a half a year of your life that's gone.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Assuming whatever financial situation you're in. So yeah, that's really my point is instead of, and this really goes out to like any parents that happen to be listening to this, is really, I just want people to consider investing in their children's future and really looking at not only the talking points that we've had about return on investment, but also, as you're raising your children, like obviously, parents want to instill values and principles that are going to allow their kids to succeed.
Right.
But, whenever they're ready to go out and make that transition into adulthood, because that's really what college is. It's like parents like wanting their kids to have a healthy transition into adulthood.
Right.
And you know, obviously with a lot of things that we've mentioned, it's not really working out very well. Number one, you know.
And I mean, I think education in general, what it started out as, in probably its more intermediate stage, obviously there's a lot of religious roots in our education system, even going way back to colonial America. But moreover, what I think the education system in this country kind of started as or got its credibility from was definitely an important one. It was improving the quality of the workforce. It was offering information. It was sharing it. But in today's information age, so much of this information can be quickly picked up by people online. It's easy enough to find all this stuff. You could really learn to become almost anything through YouTube, through Wikipedia, through open share information sites. And so at some level, the importance of college is diminished a little bit by the availability of this information. And so I think that's part of the issue we're seeing too, is again that quality. What are you getting for your money that you couldn't get through some other source? And really, I think there's not very much offered other than some of the social components, being away from home, like we talked about, kind of transitioning into adulthood, some of that independence. But even that can be, you know, that's probably something that's better spent at home, better taught at home than sending your kid off to college for $20,000 a year. You can instill that independent spirit in somebody a lot cheaper and a lot easier than $80,000 over the course of 4 years. And so I think that's something too that as parents, they really need to begin to understand that social capital is
I think one thing that's really important too, and I really kind of relate to this aspect of it, is I think a lot of parents do really care about their kids' future. And the problem where I see it is that you have kids that have this idea that I'm gonna follow this career path, you know.
Right.
I'm gonna be an engineer, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be an artist, whatever. And you know, they seem like excited about it, they want to do it, and their parents want to help them get there. But in reality, you should be questioning, well, what is that really? Is that really like a sustainable thing? Is that a sustainable sense of self identity and that sort of thing?
Yep.
And I'm gonna read a couple experts. There's a guy, Joel Salatin. Actually, he's had a really big foot in the organic food kind of revolution and that sort of thing. And wealthy investor and all that kind of stuff. I was reading a book by him recently, and it just blew the first chapter is just his childhood and him raising his kids, and it's incredible. So anyway, I'm just going to read a couple excerpts from that. So anyway, it says, I'm a big believer that children should have autonomous businesses. This teaches the value of $1, persistence, thrift, and good math skills. The earlier someone learns the difference between profit and loss, the better. I'll remember Daniel, which is his son, going down to the farm store and purchasing half a ton of unmedicated rabbit pellets when he was about 12 years old. His nose just cleared the counter, and the guys would josh with him. Only half a ton? Why don't you get a whole ton? Daniel would matter-of-factly respond, I don't have enough money for a ton. How many adults have not learned that lesson? Both of our children hit 20 years old with $20,000 in the bank. I don't believe in allowances. Nobody should be paid to breathe. This was not paid for chores. It was self-earned, saved income from their businesses and provided a wonderful nest egg for future pursuits. That, my friends, is liberating and launching. So that blew my mind when I read that, because it was like, wow, like 2 kids. He had a son and a daughter, and when they were young, like I remember his daughter, like when she was like 7 years old, like she was learning how to bake and cook with her mom or whatever. She was like into it. And they just helped her start her own business. Right. And the thing is like local communities love that. Mm-hmm. Like of course they want to support this little girl that learns how to cook and like has, you know, of course everybody wants to support that. People want to support local business and families and stuff like that. But to me, that's so much more incredible to teach a kid about finances and stuff like that. Instead of like a lot of what my background was, you know, some variation of credit card debt so you can get by
Right. Yeah. No. And that was getting back to what I was saying before too. The social capital, the intangible things that parents teach their kids are going to be so much more valuable than anything they're going to learn in the university. Because here's the thing, as an example, these kids, you strip away every degree, every title, every dollar that they have, and you give them nothing but the shirt on their back, and you throw them out on the street, and within a week, they will have found a job, a place to live, food, and probably even a vehicle or some combination thereof. They would be able to be, and that's because they've been instilled with the character traits required for this type of self-ownership, self-responsibility that most people don't have. So
it's like a bird learning how to fly.
Yeah, exactly. They
like, you better learn or you're gonna hit the ground.
Exactly.
You know? Instead of going for years to like, well, there's welfare and social security and just don't worry about it.
Yep.
Just don't worry about it. You don't need to learn how to do anything. You can just sit on your couch and watch TV.
Exactly. And so that's where, again, if you as parents, anyone who is listening that's a parent, if you as parents want to do something that's going to help your kids, teach them lessons like this, again, the self-responsibility, self-ownership, where they're going to be able to go out in the world and function, and very highly function out in the world without the need for a formal education even. Now, whether or not they need a formal education after that point is that could be determined depending on what they want to do. But what really makes success is these little character traits that don't get nearly enough credit for what they provide the people that have them.
And I always think a really good way to find this out, like let's say your kid wants to go to school for anything.
Right.
Have them, all right, sit down with them and be like, okay, if you really want to do this, have them like get a job, like have them get a full-time job, be like, all right, at the end of the year, if you can save up this much money, you know what I mean, then we'll help you, because what's really interesting is like, a lot of things change in a year. You'd be surprised even over months. Like, they might be 3-4 months into working some job and be like, you know what, I'm not sure if that's what I want to do.
Right.
It's just like that article, that person that had been in school for like, what was it, 5 years?
Yep.
And they're thinking, maybe I didn't do the right thing.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine having 6 digits of debt and being like, man, maybe that wasn't the right career path.
Exactly.
Maybe this isn't for me. And we do learn a lot from our mistakes, and I think, unfortunately, one of the biggest tragedies in our society right now is that we're paying such a heavy price for our mistakes. And it's one of the biggest areas, like for men and women both, that transition into adulthood is so important.
Yep.
And when you make that transition, very few of us just, if anyone, makes that transition flawlessly and they just know which direction. A lot of it's like, man, I tried this and I failed and I learned a lot about myself.
Yep.
But to come out of that and also have 6 digits of debt or however much debt you have,
right,
and then it's like the whole rest of your life, you're reflecting on some mistakes you made, and you don't have any money or investment, or especially with a lot of, one of the other points that I was going to even bring up was just the debt, like where it's going to hold you back later in life. Because number one, the biggest thing is really time and money with the return on investment. Because if you can't make the money back, then later down the line, what if you want to start a family?
Right.
What if you want to travel? How are you going to do that? Because I like to think about it this way. Because it's one thing to like live like a poor person and go live on the street and see if you can scrounge up whatever you can, or get a few quarters from people to buy a sandwich or whatever.
Right.
But for someone that has student loan debt, like for me, I owe about, and I'm like right about 30 grand right now.
Yeah.
Somewhere around that. But student loans are about $440 a month.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to go live with my grandma for a while and figure out my life, and she was like, don't worry about it, I'll cook for you, I'll take care of, I'll take care of your laundry and all that, don't have to worry about anything.
Right.
Well, you know what? I'm still $440 in debt every month.
Yeah.
So I still have to have at least a part-time job just to live somewhere for free.
Right.
Yeah, and if there's anything on that you want to talk about, but that's something that hits home for me, because it's like, you're at that point in your life where it's like, I spent all, for me, luckily it was only about 2 years.
Right.
But it's like you get to that point and you're like, man, I don't know if that was the right thing. I don't know if I should have done that. And then it's like, I'm stuck in this point. It's like an identity crisis. It's like, I don't know what, I need to go make more mistakes in my life. I need to travel. I need to figure out who I am. all that sort of stuff, and it's like you can't do it.
Oh yeah, no, you're kind of a prisoner to your debt in a sense. You're stuck where you're at. You're not able to really go anywhere. You couldn't, for instance, you couldn't just pick up sticks and go to Cambodia for a year and hang out there and let your debt just accrue, or 5 years and then come back, because now all of a sudden, as a U.S. citizen with a valid Social Security number that's attached to you,
And the way they're screwing you over is with co-signers.
Yeah,
because you know
true.
what,
Now
you know what, I could be like, dude, you know, I'm just gonna go run away,
right?
And you know what, screw those banks. Like maybe they'll hunt me down, maybe they won't. But the thing is, I'll always live. I could never do that because I have my dad and my sister as co-signers that I know would be completely screwed over.
Exactly.
And my sister has kids, and my dad, you know,
Right.
I have a stepsister.
Yep.
You know, who's like, you know, 19 or whatever.
Yep.
So it's like I'm not in a position where I even have the option to do that.
No, yeah, you really don't, and that's part of it too. They've got you there, and it gets back to kind of what caused it, and that is a system that desired the system itself to be fair. People really, really, really want a fair system. That's something that appeals to everybody, conservatives and liberals alike. But what the definition of fair is kind of up in the air. On the one hand, on the more progressive end of things, you have people that believe that fair is everybody has the same education or the same, you know, ability to get that education. Whereas on the conservative side, or maybe even libertarian like myself, it's a belief that everybody has the opportunity to go and do what they want to do. But that means then that with that opportunity comes the responsibility attached to it, and that means that you are responsible for, you know, your debt and the job after and stuff like that. But if we had always been on that kind of a system, we would have never seen the explosion in prices that led to the debt that you're describing. That came solely and squarely from a belief that everybody deserves to go to college, that everybody has the right to go.
All right, I gotta talk on that point because that is such a big point. And a lot of this goes back to parenting, and I'm not by any means bashing on parents. I totally believe that parents want the best for their kids and all this stuff. These are just things that need, like, conversations that I need to have with my parents, and a lot of people need to have, parents need to have with their kids and stuff like that. And, you know, a lot of it, because this is the way that I see it, is my parents were like, you know, this is so great. All these kids get to go to college and decide what they want to do with their lives, and we never had that opportunity, and you know, that's just fantastic. And it's just like, no,
it's not.
That's not what it is.
No.
It's not. It's completely like the opposite. You know, like my parents were missionaries, and they traveled the world and did that sort of thing, and
Right.
neither one of them went to college. You know, so they had no idea about. You know, I remember very vividly sitting in a restaurant with my dad after I graduated. I think it was after like my graduation ceremony or whatever.
Yep.
And you know, my dad takes me out to eat or whatever. And you know, I just remember us sitting there, and it was in June in Minnesota, so it's like it was a weird month because it was already like cold. I'm talking like 50 something degrees outside, just weird.
Yep. I remember that. Yeah.
And you know, like, think, man, it's not warm yet. It's like June 20 something.
Yep.
So anyway, we're sitting there, and he's like, so how much are you gonna like have to pay per month? You know, and I'm just under 21, and I'm like, you know, it's like $430 something. And he's like, wow, you know, and that blew my mind for several reasons. Because number one, I had never really, you know, I worked a couple jobs before college, but for the most part, my transition into young adulthood or whatever was in college, you know, and I didn't really know how much $435 a month was. I was living with my dad up until like that point.
Right.
I wasn't thinking about car insurance, rent, all of these other you know,
well, you
things
just
that you don't
working a
think about.
minimum wage job at $7 an hour. Okay, figure $400 a month at $7 an hour. That 20 hours would be $140. So that's half a week. That's part time. Now you double that. Now you work 40 hours, right? You're at $280. So you're working, basically, figure after taxes and everything, 2 weeks out of that 4 weeks of a month basically go just to that loan. which is pretty astounding. That's a lot of time and effort that goes into paying for a loan. Now, again, the idea is, the payoff is you get a better rate of return later in life. But again, did that amount to anything for you? Did it actually, become what it was? But at the end of the day, from a much more philosophical standpoint, what this all is, what this horse trading game that we do in college is our desire for contentment, which is really, when you think about it, the goal of any sentient being is contentment. Spending our hours as content as possible is really our goal, and whether or not it can be to our peril at times, but it can also be to our benefit. You're giving up essentially some of your contentment now for more contentment later, or more of your time spent content later.
I think a lot of it too is in some cases pursuit of purpose, but
Sure.
a lot of cases an illusion of purpose.
Right.
I'm
Right.
going to be an artist and it's going to be amazing and that's what I was put on this planet to do.
Right.
And then you realize how complicated life
Right.
is.
Oh, yeah.
And that, most people don't just do the same thing their whole, 80, 90, 100 years of their life or however long they live.
Yep.
Like I can't, I want to do philosophy and I want to write music and,
Right.
I want to do, I want to cook and learn more about nutrition and work out and there's, and I want to travel
Right.
and go snowboarding and, and then there's other aspects of me that you learn. You take personality tests, you take strength tests, like, things I've learned about myself is that I'm a good coordinator. I'm good with like information,
Yep.
and then, like you learn your weaknesses.
Right.
And I had a really, multi-millionaire investor, Ty Lopez. One of the things that he said he had a video where he was talking about college. One of the things that he said that was really cool to me was, basically invest in yourself. So basically, like, find how you can make the most money the fastest, so that you can invest all of that time, that money, into time, into like yourself, into like opportunities for yourself.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And one of the ways that he suggested doing that, as far as like doing something that you can make the most money the fastest and the best thing for society and all that thing, is to take these tests to figure out what your natural strengths are, and then become what he calls a deep domain expert. So basically, the idea of it is that you're so knowledgeable. Like for me, like let's say that coordination is like my biggest thing.
Yep.
Planning, setting up meetings, anything to do with that, whatever. I could find any company to do that for. I could go to school. I could whatever. His point is to become such an expert that you could stand before kings. That's the metaphor that he uses. Is basically like you could stand before a king and not have to. You could be 100% confident in what you know.
Right.
And that was something that I was never taught. I still, being 25 years old, I'm still figuring out what my strengths are.
Yep. Yep.
Which is incredible to me because, if let's say that I went to college right out of school, I technically could have been in college 6-7 years.
Sure.
Now.
Sure. Well, and I think really that gets back to, I think it would be helpful for a lot of students, probably most students, to get a job before they do anything, to really just get out into the work world and see what they want to do, what they like doing. And a lot of that has to do with even, when I was in high school, for instance, I knew what I enjoyed, things that made me content, made me happy. And now I fortunately have the ability to pursue doing what I've always loved doing, and I maybe didn't realize it when I was in college. I didn't think to myself, hey, wait a minute, maybe I can start doing some of the things that I was already doing, but for money. I can make a career out of this. You don't really put that together, because there's that.
And now with YouTube, that's the thing that blew my mind. Early on in college, this was several years, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I wrote this paper about how YouTube, it was already starting to happen, but how people were just going to make a bunch of money on YouTube.
Yep.
This was way before all the, it was basically just like Facebook. There was no
subscribers.
I don't even think there was like
and-
Instagram, or I don't even think there was
Yeah.
Twitter yet.
Yeah.
It might have been right before Twitter started or something.
Yeah.
And I basically wrote this paper on how people are going to make money doing this, you know, because I saw certain people starting channels. I saw this guy, he had this show called Movie Buzz.
Yep.
And basically all he did, he just worked his butt off and he just stood in front of a camera and he just talked about movie news. And he just loved doing it. He got all these views, and then eventually he went out to this conference in New York, and it was a bunch of YouTubers go and meet each other. And it's totally a collective thing where, you know, there's no giant CEO of a company leading this. Right. It's just, hey, let's get together, put our money together, rent out this building, whatever, meet at this place and network.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden he goes out and does this, and he's doing more of what he really wants to do, which is like direct and act. And he starts doing these short films with these guys that are getting millions and millions of views on YouTube. And then all of a sudden, and I can't tell you how many times that I've seen someone that does something cool on YouTube, and then all of a sudden they have an interview at some radio station.
Right.
And then they're on some TV show, and then they're in a movie or whatever.
Yep.
And, you know, and then the other thing is, you know, you've got guys like PewDiePie that play video games on YouTube, and they make millions of dollars.
Right.
But it's a very good testament to how culture is changing. And despite all of the weird directions we're going, how, yeah, you can figure out, you know, what do I like doing, figure out who you are, figure out what you like doing, and turn that into a service and learn how to make a return.
Right.
You know, without having to get six figures into debt to go work a job where you'll have a career title.
Yeah.
You know, and then every time you go out in public and hang out with your friends, you know, everything is all your self-esteem and everything is dependent on the career title.
Yeah.
But the question is, what are you gonna do when that's over? One thing that's really sad is I worked. I won't mention the company, but I worked for a company that basically they were like a food transporting company, like one of the biggest in the country, and there were guys there that literally, I mean, they're older. They ran forklifts and stuff. And it was a very intense job. I mean, they were no doubt in my mind some of the best in the world. Like, I mean, it was incredible. They're just flying down these aisles, less than an inch on both sides between you and them, and they're flying, like turning around, getting around these corners. You wouldn't even believe the corners that they can get around, and they're picking up. I mean, it's like everything's timed. It's crazy. And anyway, but they have these guys that you know, they're like 60-something years old. They're about to retire. And it's like all of their time has been put into like this job. And it's that's the only place where they have respect from anyone.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, they learned how to become an expert in that area. But unfortunately, they're an employee that's getting paid hourly. And, you know, outside of that, like, you know, they can go to work there and be like demand respect from people that are new or below them because, hey, they have seniority, you know? I mean, they'll just run you over if you don't respect them or whatever. But then they go home, they go out in public, like, you know, and it's like if you don't live up to whatever standards of whatever area, like if you're like, you're out of shape or, you know, you don't dress a certain way and you go to an area, like nobody cares if you're the best forklift. Like, they don't know about that. They have no idea what you even do at your job.
Right.
So, and then for me, what's interesting now is like trying to invest in myself in a social sense and like interacting with people in social skills, because that's something that, you know, I've done a lot of research on entrepreneurs and millionaires, and that's one thing that I always connect with all these guys that are super successful. They're all characters, number one. And number two, there's social skills they've worked on. And a lot of them, it's incredible. They come from, like, people that, you know, maybe were awkward or weird or shy or whatever. And then they come out of it and they just don't care and they just keep going. Yep. And then all of a sudden, you know. Yep. People. They've got it. And what it is, this is another Ty Lopez quote that I love. And another really good thing to teach young adults, too, is if you have an idea... You know, he says, if you have an idea, I'll give you 1 point. If you create a plan, I'll give you 10 points. And then if you carry it out, I'll give you 1,000. So basically the point is most people don't do that.
Yeah, they get halfway through.
Yeah, and the thing is you're going to fail, and to like, you literally can't learn until you go through the experience. Right. You have to go through with it. So whatever it is, if there is young people listening to this and you're thinking about going to college or whatever, and maybe you're not sure, or maybe you're in, or maybe you're thinking about dropping out, unless you're just like, I really want to, I know this is the path that I want to do, and you've thought about the time that you're investing and the money and getting, and the debt and all of that stuff. I highly encourage people just to take some time off, go on vacation, meditate, read some books. I can't tell you how many times, another Alan Watts thing that I listened to, and he talked about if you're just stuck in your head thinking about thoughts, then you're stuck in the world of symbols and you've lost your ability to relate to the world. And one thing that blows my mind is the more that I read books now, the more that I realize how crazy I get if I go a day without reading. Because it's like I'm just stuck in my own thoughts, and then I need someone else's life experience. I need someone else to speak, to give me something to think about that's different than what's just happening in my head. What I'm perceiving and how I process that. I need a different way.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's great about books is, the more books that I read, the more that I realize most books that people write, it's like their life experience. I mean, you're learning about people's life experiences.
Right.
That's what people write about.
Yeah.
And you can, that's the best way for you to, while you are creating ideas, creating plans, and going out with them and making mistakes and learning, you can also be reading and learning from other people's mistakes, so that you don't have to you don't have to go through as much trial and error as everyone else did. So, yeah, and do you have anything to say on that while I'm kind of looking through?
No, I mean that pretty much covers most of what I had to say.
So yeah, as far as that covers a lot of it. So the next big topic we're going to go into, and I think this is pretty much going to be the last one, is to really look into deeply why have you been motivated to want to go to college, or what or who has motivated you to consider going to college? And I'm just going to try to list the ones that I can think of, and then for me it was like, high school. Obviously, it's just like you're just with all these people. You're just surrounded by all these kids, and everyone's going to college, and it's just the topic. Every time you talk to an adult, where are you going to college? Are you going to college? And it's like a frowned upon thing if you'd say it, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Or if you drop out or whatever. And everybody's going, and everybody's just on the bandwagon. So there's their peer pressure from that.
Right.
The other thing is parents, right? Like we talked about earlier, like they think this is a good opportunity. And that sort of thing. Yeah, is there any other ones that you can think about?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is again, what I said before, that really everything that you're listing, that anybody could list, gets back to contentment as a sentient thinking being. Why people do anything, why people believe in religion, even, is really about contentment. Whether it's right or wrong, that's kind of for you guys to decide. But even somebody who has apparently in this world selfless intentions, they're charitable, they're kind, they're loving, they feed the poor, they clothe the naked. That comes from a contentment that comes from helping other people, and sometimes it comes from an internal contentment. It makes them happy.
I want to say something about content, because I think some people could take that the wrong way. Because I think what a lot of people are looking for is a sense of purpose,
right?
Like a sense of like what they're doing matters.
Exactly, but why? But why would that bug them if they didn't matter? Because they wouldn't be content unless they met, right? You see what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, really.
Well, I just don't want people to mistake that with just being content, sitting on the couch, eating chips, not doing anything with your life.
There's some connotations with the word content.
Not that that you should. Not that everybody needs to be a rocket scientist.
Exactly. No, when I say contentment, I mean a much more mental contentment. Not a contentment like, oh, I'm fed and I'm not tired and I'm having fun playing video games. It's more contentment in the sense that contentment in who you are, what you're doing, just all around contentment. I don't want to use the word happiness either, because happiness has
a duality.
Yeah, there's duality there. It means that, if you're not happy, you must be sad. Contentment is really just you have the things that you need in your life. You've done the things that you need to do to be satisfied with who you are, what you're doing, where you've been, where you're going. To be all around content is the goal, because if you're not content, you're unhappy, or in a state of wanting to seek that contentment. Now, that seeking of contentment drives our economy. It does a lot of good things. It's not bad to want contentment, but again, that is the goal, more or less. Even heaven itself. That's what I'm getting back to, is people who are extremely religious and do things in this life in the pursuit of heaven are really just thinking long term. Eternal happiness, basically eternal contentment.
Yeah, most people are thinking
that's their end goal, right? That's what their motivations. And on this earth, why are the big reasons that people go to college? Again, I'm not bashing religion. Whether it could be entirely, that could be exactly what we should be doing. I'm just saying all motivation can be brought back to that search, that quest for finding happiness, finding contentment, finding purpose. Yeah, which being content with who you are as a human being, but. Again, getting back to what college really is about, is it's providing that contentment in your career, finding a thing that you really like doing that you wouldn't be able to do if it weren't for that university or college, getting better paid, more money, so that you can support a family, so you can do the things you want to do, you can travel, you can be content financially.
Or if you're just an immature teenager, I can buy stuff.
Right, yeah, there's that too. There's the very materialistic.
I can buy the super awesome entertainment center.
Right. So yeah, at the end of the day, and this is why I don't want to knock people that are going to college either, because they're just doing what they think, are calculating with the information they have, a better way to be content, a way to be more content, to have more money, to have a better life in theory, and that's just what people are told. And that's because for a very, very long time it held true. That was a true heuristic. If you had a college degree, you were probably going to make more money. And for many, many years, that was true. But for now, foreseeably for the future, for many, many years to come, that may not be true. And you may be putting yourself into a quagmire of debt that you'll just never get out. And so that's the risk that you run. And so, college debt is a very permanent solution to a potentially temporary problem. You might be looking for that contentment now, but if you look just a little bit harder, you might find it in a much easier place for far less cost and risk.
Yeah.
So
there is one more topic I want to talk about, and it's basically just, we talk about a lot of things here, and I just want to go into different implications of where a lot of this could lead, and where I personally see it leading. And number one, it's just with all of this debt and just the inflation, the price of living going up. What I see happening is you're going to have more people living with their parents until they're older. You're going to see more people in their late 20s, even 30s, moving in. You're going to see more people living with families and tighter, just because they're just not going to be able to afford it.
Right.
And with all the cosigner thing and all of this, they've just got you trapped.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no escape. There's no way you can run away from it. It's not like, it's the revolution. When during the real starting of this country,
right?
It's not like, oh, let's just run away from the loan shark. Let's just go to another country. It's like there's no other country to go to now.
No, the electronic system will catch up with you really anywhere you go.
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, I'm gonna read one more excerpt from Joel Salatin's book, and this goes back to something we were talking about earlier. Just helping kids from an early age, instead of following this thing where they're transitioning into adulthood and they're basically just looking to fit society's mold for themselves. Instead of that, really looking at, let them figure things out, figure out relationships and figure out, what they want with their life, and what, let them make some mistakes without it being $30,000-$40,000 mistake.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really like the excerpt of this book, and by the way, if any of you guys look up Joel Salatin, this book's called Folks This Ain't Normal. I recommend every parent to read the first chapter of this book. It's incredible. Anyway, so he says, I'm reminded of a study I read about when Teresa and I were contemplating homeschooling our children. Teresa is his wife. The crux of the study was that the earlier a child learns specific spatial data, the less spiritual the child will be. Using the moon as an example, what these researchers found was the sooner children learn that the moon is comprised of this and that elements, and that it is so many miles away from the earth, the sooner they lose their awe and wonder towards the moon. It moves in the human mind from a majestic orb in the sky, a mystical object of wonderment, to simply a ho-hum rock. And, you know, I don't know about anyone else listening, but that pretty much sums up my entire public school experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like, oh, man. You know, I remember looking at, you know, now being my age, I look at some of the math that you learn when you're in high school and the things that you can figure out. You know, like if this person kicks this ball up this ramp, or if this ball is launched up this ramp at this speed and this ramp is at this angle, how high will it go? You know,
yeah.
It's like now I could never figure that out because it's like there was no application for it when we were learning it in school, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's really cool because, you know, for me personally, that was one thing that I've realized is like, you know, with what you're saying about contentment, I've realized that for me personally, I'm okay with things being simple. A lot of people go to school and they want to make a lot of money and like have a super nice house. Like, if I can just travel and get to meet new people and see new places, I don't need a ton of money.
Right.
You know,
right.
And a lot of people are like that, but I wasn't. I was someone that I had to figure that out.
Right.
You know,
find what made you content. You know, what your goals in life were, and how to achieve them. Really.
Yeah.
So
the biggest thing I want to say with this is, parents, please let your kids go on some journeys of their own before they get into a bunch of debt. You know?
Right.
Let them, you know, like let them wait a couple of years. It's not a big deal. It's not going to be that big of a deal if they start college at 18 versus 20. All right, welcome to the first episode of the Brutally Honest Show. I'm your host, James, and I'm with a very special guest, Andy Wenzel, entrepreneur, business owner, part-time philosopher, and college dropout. Yeah, do you just want to do a quick intro on your kind of what you're doing, your experience with entrepreneurship and your college experience?
Yeah, well, yeah, without going too crazy in depth, I was at the State University and didn't really care for it. I actually, from the very first time that I left high school, just given my personality, I could tell that it really wasn't for me. It felt like big high school all over again. It was high school round 2, and I loved high school. High school was a good time. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun, but at the same time I was ready for the next step, and I felt ready for it.
You were one of those kids that had a 4.0 GPA, didn't you?
Yeah, I was.
I was not that kid. I was too busy writing music and being a punk.
Yeah, well, you know, hey, teach his own, I guess.
Yeah.
And no, that's what I was really, you know, trying to do. I was doing the 4.0 thing, trying to just short of killing myself to get to that college spot, that school that I wanted to go to, that degree that I wanted, so I could get that job that I wanted. And I didn't even really know what that job was. It was just that thing, that far off thing that everybody works for, and
it was just inconceivable.
Yeah. You don't know what it is, but you know it's out there. It's that figure in the dark that you're groping after, and you know it's out there because everybody says it's there. But good luck finding it, you know. And so I got 2 years in, and I just at that point I had hit my breaking point, and I said, this is ridiculous for the amount of money I'm spending, for what little I'm learning. And fortunately, the year before my freshman year, I had come up with an idea for a business, and I pursued it. By my second year, we were on our way to developing our first product, and by my what would have been my third year, we were ready to launch. And so after my second year, I just said, no, I'm not going back, and we launched the product, and that was 3 years ago, and I haven't looked back.
Would you say in your current situation with everything you're doing that you're content, that you look forward to getting out of bed in the morning?
Absolutely. No, that's probably the best part. It was Mark Twain who said that the key to success, and I might be saying this out of order, you'll have to forgive me, you might want to check it, but the key to success is to make your vocation your vacation, or vice versa, your vacation your vocation. And what he's saying, of course, is that if you want to be successful, if you want to find that contentment, you're gonna want to make your job your career.
It's like Danny Kaye in that song Civilization. Where he lives in the jungle, and he says he's talking about people boarding an iron train, and they're packed and crowded, and it's smelly, but they're too civilized to complain.
Yeah.
And they ask him, what do they do when they're on vacation grounds? and he says, "They swim and they fish, but that's what I do year round."
Right.
And it's just like, man, you know what? That's such an old song, but man, that's just.
And that's absolutely, I think, a lot of ways the key to success, because success, there's weird ways that we measure success in our culture, but I think one that almost everybody can agree on is contentment, which we'll touch on more. But contentment really is a great way to measure success, because if you're happy, what else do you need? If you're happy doing what you're doing, and you don't need money, you don't need a fancy house, you don't need a fancy car. If the end goal of all those objects, those material things, is for somebody who can afford them to be happy, if you don't need those things to reach that happiness, that contentment, then those were all for naught anyway. So really, if the end goal is to be happy, is to be content, to find that place in your life where you're comfortable with who you are and what you're doing, your career is such a big part of that. You're going to spend a third of your day every day for much of the rest of your life. You might as well be happy doing that. And right there, that's been key to my quote-unquote success. My happiness as a person is attributed to the fact that what I'm doing for work is what I would want to do anyway. And so I
think that's a really good point, because for a long part of my life, I've always kind of wondered, like, no matter what, I've gone from job to job to job to job. And what's interesting is I've always been writing music kind of on the side.
Yep.
And, lately I've been getting into philosophy, over the last few years, and politics and stuff like that, culture. But what you said is very important as far as, like, what you would be doing anyway. Because the truth is, a lot of times when I was working these jobs, I was thinking about music, or I was thinking about writing. And I never really put enough time into just doing it, because I was like, man, And it was really funny, because I was in Chicago the other day, and I ran into this guy that overheard a conversation with a friend of mine, and he's like, look, you're always going to have that fear later in your life of, like, man,
should I have done that?
Should I have done that? What if, and that's really what I think is so important for people to understand, as far as, like, you don't know what to do with your life.
Yep.
Like, whatever you're interested in doing now, just pursue that to the fullest of your ability. And I really believe that if you do get to a point where you reach an end and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, well, at the end of that is going to be other opportunities for you. And for me personally, I just know right now, like, that's like something that I have to do. And I should have done it years ago.
Well, you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
This is the first episode, the inaugural episode of your show, and I think that's an important step. Makes a huge difference in your daily life. It takes so much stress off, and you're not worried about.
Well, because then because the thing is, like, for example, I worked this crazy job. I was working like 50 to 60 hours a week, and I would work a 12, 13-hour day, and then come home and write music until I went to bed. Wow. Like, I couldn't go home and relax. But if I had been doing what I really wanted to do all day long, then I could relax and maybe read a book, or maybe socialize with people, or maybe talk about, like, be around other people that are doing the same thing, and I can grow with them, and and like enhance my personality and enhance my character.
Oh, absolutely. No, and it's crazy too. It's funny. I get a lot of friends and stuff. They'll ask me about, hey, do you want to go out, downtown tonight or whatever? Do you want to, do something? Or what about a vacation? Would you want to go on a vacation? And the thing is at the end of the day, I don't really want to go on a vacation. I don't need to go out and do stuff, because I'm probably going to be working, and I'm going to be excited about working. I'm excited.
You're already on vacation.
Yeah, I'm on vacation. Your
vacation grounds is where you work.
Exactly. When I go out on a quote vacation, I'm more stressed about what's not happening back at work. And so it is more stressful for me to honestly tear myself away from doing what I love doing. And so I usually would prefer just to be working or focusing on that next product, that next thing that we want to come out with. And so, there's really, it's hard to describe until you're at a place like that. So.
Cool.
Was that good then?
Yeah, man.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me, man.
That's a wrap.